First of all, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview over Datera. After that, we want to talk about why we build what we build and why customers buy it. After that, of course, the how part is the real interesting one. We're going to get into the meat of the technology. And then we're going to show some interesting demos that Stephen already got a little bit of hint of, perhaps. So with that, let me jump into the overview part. What we do is an elastic data fabric, high performance, low latency, completely automated, very flexible for current generation and next generation enterprise workloads. The first incarnation of that is elastic block storage for on-premise clouds, everyone who builds a cloud. So that brings me to sort of maybe a little bit of an industry overview here. Obviously, the public cloud has sort of become the blueprint and reference model of how people look at infrastructure evolving. Now, the public cloud is perhaps not so much about only where the data is, but also how the data is managed. So that's kind of the blueprint that we bring back to the enterprise and to hosting, colos, all kinds of businesses. Now, that's not where the story ends, because realistically, the public cloud, while it gives you wonderful cost in most cases, choice, agility, scalability, it also has a few disadvantages. It doesn't always give you enterprise performance. It doesn't always give you all the enterprise capabilities. It doesn't always give you enterprise control. And then there's data sovereignty and data governance. So there are a number of reasons why public cloud is not the only answer. Maybe the world is more diverse. And that's what the longer term vision of the company is, a unified hybrid cloud data infrastructure. That's what we're building longer term. We're going to talk a little bit about this today as well. Now, where we are currently is we built the Cloud Data Management Foundation, the Cloud Storage Foundation for on-prem clouds. For everyone who builds a cloud, perhaps outside of the Super 7, that's where we come into play, okay? The key thing here, of course, it's completely self-tuning. It's completely self-driving, so to speak. That seems to be en vogue, that word. Invisible data infrastructure. Maybe a few key points here up front. It's deeply policy-based, and we'll talk about that in more detail. So all the automation is based on policy. That's a key attribute of our product. Another key attribute is on the data plane. We were pretty obsessed about high performance and low latencies, and we built the stack from ground up to optimize it to that end. And so you'll see that a little bit in the demos. And then obviously all the niceties of cloud, scalability, agility, simplicity. And we are on a march to do 100% operations offload, i.e. minimize sort of, the human interaction in like operating all these data infrastructure at scale. So here the mission is give people kind of in some sense a better than public cloud, at least with regard to performance and enterprise features on-prem. Simplicity, agility, just basically bring that from public cloud to on-prem. That's where we currently are. That's the current product. And then in the future, sort of connect all these cloud silos, so to speak, to some larger hybrid cloud data management, okay? And this gives the CIO a fabric that gives him optionality or her optionality across private and public clouds. Now, what's the market gap? And I always like to link that to sort of the earlier stages of industrial revolution or industrialization. Most enterprises, I would argue, are probably in what sort of is indicative in this picture. You have some automation, but it's pretty rigid, it's pretty inflexible, it's high touch, it's kind of siloed, so to speak. And that's really where most of the industry is right now, outside of obviously the likes of Amazon, Google, and Azure's. They build their infrastructure in expensive silos. Legacy IT, high touch silos. Now, there's a lot of open source here coming to infrastructure, and the question is how useful is that to get people out of this and into a more modern kind of operating environment? And the problem is open source fundamentally typically is not built to be operated as a service. That's almost as an oxymoron, because the business model of open source is to sell services. So clearly you want to like not build it to be self-operating, right? So all these tools really don't get us to the promised land, which is complete automation, end to end, okay? Aggravating this is data gravity, because once you have it in those silos, it's even harder to get it out of those silos. So data is even harder. It is the foundation of this. And public clouds are not necessarily helping either, because they have captive data services. Once you have the data in public cloud, it's a little bit like Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. So that's not necessarily the right answer either. So what we feel is we want to bring the equivalent of this kind of modern automation self-driving car model to the enterprise. Okay, so what does that mean? The system is built from ground up to be operated as a service. Scalable, simple, agile. It's application-defined automation, so the applications determine what they want out of the infrastructure, and we deliver that automatically, seamlessly. And it is a bit the equivalent in that sense to a self-driving car, because if you think about it, a self-driving car is not only just a bunch of sensors and sort of actors. A self-driving car, ultimately, Tesla is on a march to completely operate the car autonomously, self-driving, based on the intent of the driver. And this is where intent comes in as well. Okay, we want to operate, and we are on a path to that, operate the infrastructure based on the intent of the applications. And then, as I said, the next step beyond that is you take this concept, because intent is invariant. So that means it's portable, it's composable, it's hybridizable, and that means ultimately it can give people choice between any number of clouds. It makes data and applications portable. But for all of this, data is the foundation, and it's the hard part, and that's what we bring to cloud. So I would we typically break down the market in sort of 3 big segments. One obviously is public cloud, $20 billion plus market. One is the colo hosting market, about the same size actually, just a lot more fragmented. And then of course a huge enterprise traditional IT market. The movements in this cloud are that a lot of this is going into public cloud, a lot of it is going into colos, and frankly some of it is even going from public cloud to colos. So it's a very interesting dynamics going on in that market. What the public cloud has done ultimately, of course, it has pooled resources, and it has automated delivery of these resources, and that allowed it this flexibility, agility, simplicity, and all this wonderfulness that they're bringing. Okay, but it all is based on a very scalable, equally automatable data infrastructure underneath, and that's what we're bringing to the other guys. We're bringing the same simplicity on the data infrastructure that people now increasingly are getting used from on the application framework. And by the way, we're doing it software-defined, and we're doing it on standard x86 servers. And on top of that, we can mix and match them. And one of the new things we want to show today is our ability to mix and match hybrid nodes and all-flash nodes seamlessly in one single fabric and pick the right nodes based purely on application intent and policy. Okay? So that's where we are today. And I'll say it one more time, the longer-term future outlook, of course, is to then combine seamlessly multiple clouds in one general hybrid infrastructure. All right, so that gets us to the promised on-prem clouds, kind of better than AWS in some sense data services, true scale out with mix and match devices, any type of media in one single fabric, picked smartly to deliver multiple tiers of service completely automatically. So this really gets us on this march of 200% operations offload. And by the way, combine that with enterprise performance and capabilities. If you compare us to a number of other software-defined vendors, we have easily 10 times their performance, especially on writes, even higher, at 1/10 of the latency. And we'll show this in a little bit. It's quite compelling numbers just on the data plane. Again, we combine this then with cloud operations, which really brings simplicity and agility into the picture. This approach that where if you look at what systems vendors were in the last generation, they were really more box-oriented or single box-oriented. The system vendors of the futures are going to be the guys who think about this as infrastructure as a service. And they build a complete ecosystem around building and delivering that. And that's how we look at the data layer, the storage layer of it. Self-tuning, complete auto placement, in both directions, vertically and horizontally, based on application requirements. As I said, ultimately, the next step will be to expand this beyond on-prem and really bring multi-cloud optionality to the CEO so that they have choice of where they put the data and how they grow their clouds. So that's perhaps an overview here. And with that, I would turn to Ashok, who will tell us a lot more technical details about how we do this.